And welcome to Too Many Movies, the podcast where we discuss DVDs, Blu-rays, and even the occasional VHS tape. VHS tape. Yeah, VHS tape. We talk about those from time to time, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When have we never talked about a VHS tape before?
I guess you haven't been on a VHS tape episode yet.
I haven't. That's true. Yeah.
I mean, you were technically on episode 100. That's technically that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess we haven't. Someday you'll get your chance. Sorry, the reason I kind of trailed off there is I was just making sure my computer's still exporting, because right now, as we're recording right now, it's May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. Haha, Homer's Jedi. I'm exporting the Goofy movie episode. By the time people hear this episode, they would have already listened to the Goofy movie episode, but right now it's exporting, so I'm just making sure it's still exporting on my other laptop.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I do actually have something Star Wars related to the discussion of the movie that I recommended for this episode. Actually, later on, I'll mention it later.
Yeah,
when I go into details.
Yeah, but yeah, let's start things off by introducing that specific movie you wanted to talk about today. That being South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. I happen to have it on DVD. And we're here to talk about it. Lazy, with just a slight little backstory. The reason we're doing this is because this is for making up for the fact that you were almost on the Blue Velvet episode, because there was a lot of scheduling issues with that. It all worked out in the end, thank God. But I was thinking, all right, if CAC doesn't work out, I need somebody as a backup. And I made you a backup. And then I said, all right, if it doesn't work out and I don't need you at all, then you can talk about whatever movie you want for the next episode you're on. And we're here to do that.
Yeah, that was perfect. I even rewatched Blue Velvet in case I had to vouch for the guest on the Blue Velvet episode. It's still a really good movie. Spoiler alert, it's not as good as the South Park movie, but anyway. What else was I gonna say? But yeah, you said I could recommend basically anything I wanted, so I was like, anything I want. You haven't talked about the South Park movie yet, and I remembered you said you had it on DVD, so I was like, I better do it before someone else does it.
Yeah. So, I don't remember where I got this one. Well, that's not true, actually. Now that I think about it, I think I do remember where I got it from, and it's the same flea market I got the Star Wars Holiday Special from. Not the same year. This was definitely a 2019 purchase. When I went to that flea market, there was a bunch so there's always been a bunch of different trips I've taken to that flea market. The holiday special one was 2022. That's when I got it at that flea market. But this flea market I went to in 2019, one of the movies I definitely got from there was the South Park movie on DVD. There's actually a bunch of DVDs I got on that trip that I feel like would have made for awesome episodes. And for whatever reason, I got rid of them all. But this one stayed. I'm kind of glad this one stayed, because, I mean, not only because the South Park movie is really good, but like, I don't know. I guess I felt like I feel like some of the other movies I got rid of from that trip are movies that are good and I considered really good. But I guess I just didn't have any interest in doing episodes on them at the time. I don't really know why I got rid of them, but I guess thank God
they weren't as good as the South Park movie.
I guess not, but like, I don't know, because I feel like the South Park movie I watched in 2019.
Who knows? I don't know which movies got rid of.
But... Well, so South Park the movie I watched for the first time back around that time when I got it on DVD, and I thought, yeah, this rules. But I feel like I didn't see it for years. I've talked about this before. Sometimes you don't watch movies for years, and so you don't really remember anything about them. And I feel like I was this close to getting rid of this DVD just because I thought, not even just because I thought it was a bad movie, it's just I just don't remember anything about it. Why do I still have it? But I'm glad I kept it on so that we can do this episode. And also because I've seen the movie multiple times since then, and it rules. It's South Park the movie, like, It's often considered to be one of those TV to movie adaptations that is so good. Like, so it's a special movie. What is your history with the South Park movie?
I don't remember the first time I watched it. I know I've watched it before for sure. I remember I mean, I remember hearing about it with my dad told me about it when I was a younger kid. When I think South Park, I still remember. I was obviously more acquainted with South Park the show before I was acquainted with the movie. So I remember like hearing about the movie like through what my dad told me about it. It was a whole like thing, like a war against Canada and that kind of thing. But I don't remember if I watched it as a kid or if I know I've watched it in recent years, obviously, but I still I have an interesting history with South Park the show though, because that's actually one of the few cartoons that I still remember the first episode I actually ever watched though. I remember it was actually I was watching some anti-bully movie that I think my dad like rented from Redbox at some point, and I watched I noticed that my dad actually wasn't even watching the movie itself. He was watching some cartoon on his iPad, and it was the South Park episode Mr. Hanky the Christmas Pooh, and that was the first time I ever heard of South Park as a 10-year-old kid. So
Anti-bullying
I think that was I think
movie.
it's interesting.
Like something you'd see
I
in
think
health
it was
class?
probably, yeah. I think it was. I don't remember what the name of the movie was. It might have been called Bully, uh, but I don't remember. But I do think that South Park did a parody of bullying movies.
Mhm.
So I think that might have been that they might have actually parodied the movie that I was watching at that time. So
Honestly,
there's an
I trust Trey and Matt on dealing with bullying than those bullying movies you would see in health class, to be quite
yeah.
honest.
Be honest. It's they parodied it in an episode called Butterballs in season 16. Great episode, by the way. But
Mm.
and what's your history with South Park? Have you watched a lot of episodes, or
So
you're kind of a casual fan?
definitely more of a casual. I haven't seen it as often as I have stuff like The Simpsons or Family Guy. Obviously, Simpsons is the big one, and by that I mean I've only ever really watched and rewatched the first 8 seasons religiously. Um, Family Guy I've seen a handful from time to time, but South Park, yes, I have seen a handful of episodes. I used to watch it when I was a kid, whenever I'd be able to go downstairs and watch on Comedy Central. Um, I want to say my introduction to South Park was before I even knew what South Park was, and that was when I'd go over to a friend's house and we'd go onto YouTube, and I must have been like, I want to say between the ages of 10 and 12. So that era, between like 2008 and 2010, we would go on YouTube and we'd just watch. We'd watch a couple of things. Obviously, early YouTube poops, early epic rap battles of history. There's this really bizarre, I have very vague memories of this very bizarre series of videos that were like pixelated Sonic characters that had a pitched up Microsoft Sam voice as their audio. And the one, I can't remember much of it, but there was this one video I remember. It was it wasn't even a minute long, but it was Silver, and and maybe Sonic was also there. I just remember Silver was involved. And at one point they're just like talking, and at one point I think it's Silver just goes, "I'm a firing my laser," and then shoots a laser, and then the video ends. Um
Hmm.
Anyway, point is, one of the videos we used to watch a lot was taking the classroom scene from the South Park movie when they first say fuck in front of Mr. Garrison, taking that clip and putting either SpongeBob visuals over it or Sonic X visuals over it, just like putting visuals over that. So I grew up with that audio. I knew every word of that scene like by the time I was 10 years old, which is really funny. So I knew that by heart, but before I even knew what South Park was. And then as I got older, I then realized what South Park was. That same kid, I would go to his house. Then sometimes I would watch South Park at his house, and I was always like, "Oh, this is dirty." Like I'm watching South Park at a friend's house. Like my parents don't want me watching South Park, but it's like, but looking back on it, it's kind of cringy. But at the time, yes, my parents would never have allowed me to watch South Park. Just funny looking back, they were fine with me watching The Simpsons, but I mean, you know.
Yeah. I remember I asked you. I think you were doing some kind of you were doing some kind of Q&A on a letterbox post, paint drying post that you did, and I
Mm,
asked you from what you've seen, because I kind of figured that you haven't watched a ton of South Park, but
right.
from what you had probably seen, I asked, what's your favorite episode that you can remember? And you said it was the one where Butters gets a ninja star stuck in his eye.
Hmm.
That's Good Times with Weapons. That's the season 8 premiere. That is a phenomenal episode and one of
Yeah.
the best of the whole
And
series.
honestly,
Yeah, so that was a great pick.
I don't remember much of it. I just remember, yeah, when they're anime characters. I remember some of the song. I remember, yeah, Butters gets a ninja star to the eye, and
Yeah.
they're super annoyed at him. I remember that it's their fault. They get the ninja star in his eye, and he's complaining
Yeah.
about it, and even they're just like, "Shut the fuck up! Like, let us figure this out."
Yeah, I actually have a shirt based on that episode too. It's
Yeah.
like all the 4 boys like in those kind of really buff like anime-esque designs of theirs, and I've seen people pass by me and be like, "Oh wow, I love that episode," and like that's cool. And they even reference the whole Janet Jackson Super Bowl incident at the end of the episode too.
Let's fighting love.
Yeah, it's classic. They even performed that song at the 25th anniversary concert.
Yeah. So
Classic.
yeah, so I'm aware of certain South Park moments and stuff. I just haven't sat down and watched through the whole show as I would The Simpsons. But watching the movie, I know enough to understand who these characters are, what their dynamics are, and stuff like that. And and I can still enjoy it as a movie, despite my, norminess when it comes to my knowledge of South Park.
Yeah. I think it works well for fans and also a general audience too, because there's some callbacks to certain stuff. Like the whole Brian Boitano thing is actually a callback to one of the very first shorts that
Mm.
preceded South Park. Actually, The Spirit of Christmas. It was the Jesus versus Santa short, where basically like the boys like they notice that Jesus and Santa are like fighting over who's the real pioneer of Christmas, and so like Stan goes like, now we have to think here. What would Brian Boitano do? And so all the boys wonder to themselves, what would he do? And so he just passes them by and gives them advice on what to tell Jesus and Santa to call off the fight. So
Yeah,
that was really funny.
I would never have known that, but it's still a funny joke in the movie where they're just like, "What would
Yeah.
Brian Boitano do?"
It's a great song too. It's one of the best
Oh,
songs
yeah.
in the movie.
Well, that's the thing with this movie, and we can get into that, is that it's a musical, and it rules as a musical. It's really good.
It is.
Every song they're both really good. They're all the songs are really good. I could listen to them separately from the movie. But they also progress the plot along. I mean, the plot is pretty simple, all things considered, but it's still progressed through pretty well. And I just really appreciate that, even though it is a bit of a joke that this movie's a musical, it's still taken seriously as a musical.
Music is fantastic, like you said. Like so many good songs in this, like from La Resistance, the opening song, Mountain Town, and even the reprisal at the end is fantastic. Up there, did I mention that one already? We probably did, but again, so many great songs. I also have to give a shout out to the second song that plays at the very end, and it's a song performed by Michael McDonald. Actually, it's
Mm.
"Eyes of a Child," which is really good.
Yeah, that's during the credits.
I know Trey actually, Trey wrote the lyrics to that song. It's genuinely fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so these guys are obviously very talented when it comes to, yeah, they're raunchy, but Trey and Matt obviously have some real talent to them. The fact that they can write these really good songs and these really good jokes. And yes, the animation has always been simple because it's South Park, but there's still an impressiveness to the animation style, you know?
There's a lot of great visuals in this movie, like especially like when Kenny is like going to hell and like it has all these like demonic like figures that are tearing him apart. that was great.
Yeah. Little
He had
boy,
to
you're going to
outsource that
hell.
to a different company. Little boy, you're going to hell. And then you know who actually performed that song is Metallica.
Okay. Because I thought that was Trey who was singing that song, but no, I guess it's Metallica.
Yeah, yeah,
I
legitimate.
mean, I'm not surprised. Like, the people they could pull for this, because South Park is huge, and so when they're making a movie, I'm sure they're going to go all out with the budget. I mean, you could tell that just from the music alone. Like, the music is so orchestral and cinematic sounding. Even besides the musical numbers, I'm talking like the score is intense.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So yeah, they got Metallica involved, of course.
I know that when they approached like making this a musical at first, it was definitely a risk though, because this was, they mentioned, I was listening to the audio commentary for it yesterday. They said this was before like the whole musical resurgence of the 2000s when stuff like Chicago came out. So like obviously Paramount never even marketed this movie as a musical or any of the musical numbers in the film itself. So no one really knew about it until the movie came out. But I think a lot of it was definitely parodying a lot of the Disney Renaissance films that came out earlier that same decade. Of like, you know, like especially the whole Mountain Town song is very reminiscent of the Beauty and the Beast song, where like Belle is like singing around the town. But it's like really funny here because the movie itself is basically it's basically a, you know, it's an animated movie marketed towards a general audience. So most people would probably assume that it's probably made for families. So I think the idea of like parents taking their kids to see something like this and thinking that it's for kids, I mean, and having that whole like opening musical number where like everyone's singing about how beautiful their town is, and then they just go to a movie and the words uttered by Terrence and Phillip, "Shut your fucking face, Uncle Fucker." Yeah, I have to wonder how parents would have reacted to that.
Honestly, if you're a parent in 1999 and you honestly think you can bring your 10-year-old child or your very young child to the South Park movie, you're a fucking idiot, and you deserve whatever's coming to you. You know, like it's clearly marked rated R. It's clearly the South Park movie. Everybody knows South Park is this raunchy show. So, I mean, look, parents will still bring their young children to R-rated movies even today. So, I wouldn't be surprised if there were some genuine fucking morons bringing their children to the South Park movie.
On the audio commentary, actually, they brought in some of the South Park alumni, you know, to talk about the movie itself. And they brought in Bill Hader near the end of the commentary, because I don't know if you knew this, but Bill Hader was actually a writer on South Park for a few seasons.
I didn't know that, but then I remember I think I saw like a video thumbnail on YouTube one time that said Bill Hader on writing the South Park Kanye West gay fish joke. And I'm like, oh, wait, he wrote for South Park? I didn't know that. But,
he did, yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's cool.
He could even be seen in the 6 Days to Air documentary of the making of a South Park episode too. He doesn't work on the show anymore, but he still his presence in South Park history is still very much felt. Yeah, but I remember he told the story in the audio commentary about how when he went to see this movie, he saw like a parent take his kids to see it, and then like after a few minutes in, they just immediately left.
Yeah, it's like I can't even. It blows my mind that people can be that stupid. Some
parents are really just that dumb.
It's incredible, just the amount of, and you know what, this movie is about those parents who make these kinds of bad decisions, and so it's just pure irony at that point.
The whole movie, South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut is the rare movie that tells kids, you know what, fuck your parents, because they act so completely out of pocket throughout this whole film, because they basically want to wage war against Canada because of all the inappropriate content they allow on their television programs, and so they go off blaming other people other than the kids themselves for watching stuff that they shouldn't be watching. You know,
I mean, because that goes beyond what the movie is saying, but like, I mean, this is an issue, and even to this day, it's always been an issue. Yes. Children, when they're told not to do something, are going to be like, well, now I want to do it. And especially when it comes to inappropriate content. Yeah, you tell a kid, oh, you can't watch the South Park movie, they're going to go, well, I'm going to fucking watch it now. You know, like I said at the beginning, as a kid, I went to my friend's house, we would watch South Park, and I thought it was cool because this is something I couldn't do when I was at home.
Yeah, I even watched some South Park when I was a kid too. So like kids are gonna watch inappropriate stuff now, especially
Mm-hmm.
with them more with the internet becoming more accessible.
Yes.
I've watched tons of like inappropriate stuff on YouTube when I was a kid.
Yeah, I did too.
Kids are just gonna watch this kind of stuff regardless of how much you don't want them to.
Yeah.
You
Now,
know?
and I also agree, and I agree with the parents to an extent where it's like, well, I don't want my child watching this. Yeah, I agree. You shouldn't let your child go all willy-nilly watch whatever they want on the internet, because I've met people who will go on the internet who, as children, did watch whatever they wanted. Kind of didn't turn out all that great. But someone like me, when I did get, I feel like I did get enough restrictions, but I was able to figure it out for myself to an extent as well, so that I feel like I can handle whatever. But I'm glad that I did have some restrictions to an extent where it I wasn't ready for a lot of this stuff, you know? Like, because as a
Yeah.
kid, you shouldn't have unrestricted access to the internet. It's dangerous, especially nowadays. You see some kids who do get unrestricted access to the internet, and you end up with people like the Rizzler. And it's like, that is absolutely going to ruin that child. The fact that he's just this incredibly famous child on the internet. It's totally going to fuck with his mind. Like, that's not good. So in that sense, yes, I agree with that. But as this movie shows, even though you have the best intentions in trying to protect your children, it can lead to very disastrous results. Obviously, very much to the extreme in this movie. It's obviously for fantasy and for jokes, but there is still that, you know, sometimes people will take things too far, no matter the circumstances, you know?
Exactly. Like these parents are trying to censor what their kids are allowed to see, and
Mhm.
yet at the same time they're being a bad role model for their kids by trying to kill
Exactly.
Canadians.
Yeah, waging war on Canada, which is a very funny concept. Waging war on
Yeah.
Canada, it is incredibly funny. But yeah, and also I like that the movie does show that there's still a lot of hypocrisy in wanting to censor things for children, because this movie is rated R purely because of all the swearing, not because of the violence. Not like, yes, the
Although there
violence
is violent
there
stuff
is
in it,
violence, there is sexuality and stuff like that, but we tend to, and now, and when I say we, I mean the MPAA tends to have these weird stipulations when it comes to how they, you know, how they rate something. And I feel like that's what this movie does. It's trying to show the hypocrisy in that, because yeah, there is a lot of hypocrisy in us trying to censor, you know, a lot of stuff like sexuality and swearing in movies and shows, but then violence kind of gets a pass. Not always. I feel like people tend to kind of oversell just how much we're willing to show violence to children in American media. But I do agree violence isn't on the same level to a lot of people as sexuality and swearing is, you know?
Yeah, I know that Trey and Matt, who you know when they were making this movie, I think they had a lot to deal with in regards to the MPAA.
Yes.
They also dealt with they also had some troubles with the MPAA on their previous film Orgasmo, but with
Mm.
this film especially. I know Paramount was approaching them trying to make the movie PG-13 because they felt that it would sell more tickets because of that. But Trey and Matt, they were very active in trying to make this R-rated, because if they weren't allowed to go all out on what they can't do on a TV program for the time, then why make the film at all?
Yeah.
And that's a very valid reason, you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
And there's even that whole message at the end, because this whole movie, the you know how and batshit insane it is, and how hard R it is. The whole thing is basically a middle finger to the MPAA itself.
Yes.
And there's that whole. I remember at the very end of the movie, there's that whole like line that that Hal's mom says, where she says, "Remember what the MPAA says: horrific, deplorable violence is okay as long as people don't say any naughty words."
Yeah, exactly. That's the big thematic thing with the movie. It's like, really? That's what we're getting angry over? And look, yeah, I can see both sides, but I am very much somebody who is, I don't like censorship when it comes to that level. You know, you can argue, oh, that makes me sound like one of them pro freedom of speech, anti censorship kind of guys. Because yes, a lot of those kinds of people have taken over the argument, and so it's kind of cringe to hear me say that. But That's true. I don't like censoring people. I think you should be allowed to say whatever you want. I think you should be allowed to watch whatever you want, you know. But on the level of South Park the movie, you know, when it comes to, I don't know, just making something raunchy for the sake of being funny and just making jokes, yeah, I think that's totally fine. And if you're really gonna throw a shit fit over that, that's kind of cringe, you know?
Yeah, the movie itself even argues against censorship itself, even with the whole subplot where Cartman has a V chip implanted in his head,
Hmm.
and basically every time he tries to say, every time he swears, just naturally, he always gets kind of shocked or something like that because of what was planted in his head. So
Yeah. When it,
I
when
think
it,
that in itself. I know a V chip is actually was used for like real TVs back in the day to censor like any profane language. So
Mhm.
that adds another thematic element to the movie itself too.
Yeah, I mean, censorship to that degree has always kind of confused me. Even as a kid, I never got it. You know, when you have on television, you're bleeping out censored words. And as a kid, I'm thinking, okay, I know what words they're saying, though. So what's even the point of censoring it out? Same thing with radio. Whenever they put certain songs on the radio, they'll just bleep out certain words. Not even bleep them out, just kind of take them out, and so then the song sounds a lot more awkward with them. And at that point, I'm again, same thing. What's the point? I know what words they're saying. Why are we going to all this trouble to ruin the experience? It's very, very distracting.
Exactly, especially when it's a funny moment too.
And sometimes that can be funny. You know, I watched the first episode of South Park, and they do have censored moments where you have characters say something, and like towards the end, Kyle goes on a rant, and a lot of what he's saying is bleeped out, and that is funny. But I feel like, you know, there are certain times when a character will have a sentence bleeped out, and it's like, I feel like this is kind of ruining the experience. It's pointless, you know.
Yeah, pretty much. Although I do think this movie, if I'm allowed to talk about, uh, if I'm allowed to talk about some of this stuff from, a South Park fan perspective, I do think this movie itself is probably one of the most important things to come out of South Park history, because especially since this movie came out in 1999, which is over 25 years ago now, and it's still pretty early in the show's run. The movie only came out only like a couple of years after the show first premiered, which is pretty unusual, as stuff like the Simpsons movie or the SpongeBob movie, they came out like several years after those shows premiered. But
Mm-hmm.
I think the movie itself, I think it basically kind of made South Park the long running juggernaut it is today. Because
Mm.
basically what happened is that when the show premiered in 1997, it became a huge hit. It obviously launched Comedy Central into the stratosphere. But when season 2 came out, it left a lot of fans cold, because what happened is that at the end of season 1, it had this whole plot centered around finding out who Cartman's real father was, and it ended on a cliffhanger. So fans had to wait like months for season 2 to premiere to find out who Cartman's father was. But they played a bait and switch on the audience and cut to some random Terrence and Phillip episode for the season 2 premiere. So a lot of fans were left unhappy.
Oh,
And
come
so,
on. Really? People got mad at a
but
comedy show trying to be funny?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I think that,
uh,
well, I mean, I do kind of understand some of the frustration, because
I
Terrence and
guess.
Phillip episode for season 2, like the very start of it, wasn't very good. I think people wanted, but I mean, I wouldn't mind. I'm not personally bothered by it that much, because I know South Park's a comedy. It's always gonna
Yeah.
play pranks and tricks. But
I
I know Trey and Matt have gone on since then saying that season 2 is probably their least favorite season of the whole show,
okay.
and that it's actually the only season until they stopped doing commentaries that they never did an audio commentary for, though.
Hmm.
They pretty much they did season 1, but they skipped over season 2. Like, they're basically kind of ashamed of it.
Interesting.
And
I don't know, because like I feel like getting mad at that would be like getting mad at the subversive stuff that Smiling Friends does, you know? How like a lot of Smiling Friends episodes aren't taken that seriously, and for people to be like, "Oh, I can't believe they didn't take this story very seriously." It's like, it's Smiling Friends. Why are we getting mad that the characterizations of Smiling Friends isn't to the extent that we want them to be? We're here to watch these characters be funny. You know what I'm trying to say?
I know, I get what you mean, yeah, but I mean, I can understand if someone was really invested in finding out who Cartman's father was, which people wouldn't find out who he really was until like years later, and I mean years, until like season 14. But
Okay.
I mean, I can understand some of that. I think like interesting thing is that South Park kind of started off as this pretty decent, sort of somewhat disposable cartoon that had its moments, but you can kind of tell it wasn't anything that special. I'd say around season 3, and especially when this film came out, South Park went from a decent to good show to a great show, though. This, I think, started the whole golden age of South Park in my eyes and many people's eyes.
Yeah, sounds it. I mean, some shows don't usually get to where we see them as the golden age until later on. Like, you know, The Simpsons was not in its golden age until, I would argue, season 3, but some people would say 4, 5, and 6 is the golden age, which it is. 4, 5, and 6, like straight up. So season 5 of The Simpsons is straight up might be some of the most perfect seasons of television I've ever seen. Like season 5 specifically, one of the most perfect seasons of television I've ever seen, if you really get into it. But that's obviously not what we're talking about.
Yeah, I do think that seasons 3 through 8 are basically the highlight of The Simpsons.
Yes.
And people usually say seasons 1 through 8, but I don't know. I feel like seasons 1 and 2, I feel like they're not to where they're not, they don't reach the peak parts of the show. I'd say season 3 is when it gets really good.
I'm obviously very nostalgic for seasons 1 and 2. Like, I have a soft spot for them, but yes, they are not what you would think of when you think of the Simpsons. The episodes that people think of when they think of the peak of the Simpsons would be seasons 4 through 6. Like, some of those stuff are genuinely some of the best television ever written. It's incredible, like the amazing comedy in those seasons.
I feel the same way in regards to South Park too.
Yeah,
like
that sounds.
I've already said before, the first 2 seasons aren't too great. I don't think they're as bad as like Trey and Matt have said they are. I know Trey and Matt have said in retrospect that they hate the first 3 seasons of the show. They think they're kind of embarrassed by it and nowadays, but
I mean,
I don't think they're that bad.
You're always your harshest critic.
That is true, yeah. But I think that in my eyes, there's not really a concrete agreed. There's not really a consensus on what is the peak era of South Park. If I were to give a rough estimate in my own personal opinion, I'd probably say seasons 4 through 14 were like the perfect stretch of the show. Like those, I'd say that stretch of the show has the overall quantity of the best episodes in the series.
That's longer than The Simpsons.
A lot of the iconic. So. It is, yeah. That is the thing, though. Is I think the reason why I love South Park a ton is I even compared to other like long running cartoons, I'd say overall, despite its missteps in the last 10 years, I'd say it is overall the most consistent in terms of quality out of all the big name cartoons.
Yeah, I even though I haven't seen a bunch, I would not be surprised at that. I mean, again, as a huge Simpson head, like I said, it's only really for seasons 1 through 8. Anything after that, I really can't argue for, because why the fuck would I? You know?
Yeah, and I do think a reason for that is because Trey and Matt have been involved with South Park from the very beginning, so they basically are involved with every single episode. Yeah. They've even been involved with some of the tie-in materials, like they've been involved with some of the games and stuff like that. So they make sure that no one else gets their hands on it to potentially, fuck it up.
Yeah. Plus, it seems as though South Park is in a similar. I know I'm going to get a lot of shit for this when I say this, but it's in kind of a similar park as Family Guy. Not quality-wise, I'll make that clear. But it's not. It feels like the shows are excuses for the creators to make these really interesting storylines and really funny jokes and really funny gags. But like you said, Trey and Matt are obviously far more involved with South Park, and so that's the good ending. Whereas Family Guy, Seth, you can tell, obviously got way less interested in the show, and so then the quality really severely dipped after a while.
I remember he even said back in an interview, like in 2011 or something like that, that he wished the show would end. So,
which 2011?
I'm gonna be honest. Yeah, that's 2011. That's
and
over
it's
a
still
decade
going.
I'm gonna be honest though,
boy.
I have not watched a ton of Family Guy. Like I've watched some episodes, like I've been in a hotel room where
Mhm.
like I would just turn on the TV and it's on. But I have not watched nearly as much Family Guy as I have for The Simpsons, or certainly not South Park. That's the show I've watched the most out of all the big
Yeah.
adult cartoons.
Oh yeah, no, Family Guy. Family Guy is really only good if you watch it in Family Guy cutaway compilations. Honestly, I mean, it's fine when you watch it. It's weird to watch a Family Guy episode all the way through because you watch it and you're like, this is weird. I don't know. I just, because sometimes it's really not funny and really painful to sit through. But then you watch like the compilations on YouTube and you're like, oh, this is actually really funny. Oh, I could watch this all day. And I've done that. I've done days where I'll just be sitting in my bed for 5 hours straight watching Family Guy YouTube compilations. And it's like, some of these are really funny. But, you know, that's because Family Guy that's just what Family Guy is. Whereas I feel like South Park, you're getting a much different experience from South Park.
Oh, definitely. They, I know that Trey and Matt were very vocal in terms of like not giving a single fuck while making this movie because after the way that season 2, after the way it was received, they basically kind of sensed that the whole South Park phenomenon at the time was coming to an end. So if they were going to make a movie, they were going to do whatever the fuck they wanted. And that's exactly what they did.
I'm glad they did.
That's why I think that's so good.
Yeah. Because this is one of those times, I've gone back and forth on what I prefer. Not true. I've kind of realized it's a little more complicated than that. Because obviously, you know, you always hear about movies that get kind of fucked over in the studio process, where studios will get their grubby little hands all over a movie and kind of take away certain aspects, put in things that probably shouldn't have been there in the first place, and so the creative vision is ruined. But on the other end of that, you have movies that have the creator giving like 100%, getting 100% of their vision, you know, to where they want it, where they get final say on everything. And yes, sometimes that can be really good. This is obviously a very positive time where that happens, where they got to do whatever they wanted. They got final say on this stuff, and the movie benefited from that. But then sometimes you watch movies that do get 100% creative control, and they get kind of messy after a while. But again, this is definitely a time where it worked out. And yes, it's a good thing the studio didn't get involved in. Trey and Matt got to do whatever they wanted because, oh yeah, I would not want this movie any other way.
And the show was produced in the same way too. They're basically given creative control to make fun of whoever they want, whenever they want. Well, except if it, you know, references a certain prophet somewhere. But that's besides the point. So, but yeah, this is I think this is probably the best case scenario for a South Park movie, especially at the time, since it was like we said before, it was I think the whole film itself was commenting on the whole like controversies that South Park was getting, you know, earlier in its run, and how parents were responding to it, and even like a lot of and even like some of the controversies it was getting. And you know, I think that I forgot to mention, but I think the plot of this whole movie was actually pretty similar to an episode in season 1. There was an episode called Death that also involved like the parents trying to rebel against Terrence and Phillip, but but instead they just found out that the kids were watching it on TV, so they marched straight to the network headquarters where they were like airing it from, and they were slingshotting themselves to like the network headquarters building, basically killing themselves to get it off the air. It's just pretty funny. But I think the thing is though that there is sort of a rough quality to those earlier episodes that I think is pretty much refined with this, you know, with this movie. So I know that Trey and Matt, I really like listening to them in a lot of commentaries and interviews and stuff like that, because I think they're really smart to listen to.
Yeah.
And they have this whole like writing process. And I think that you could tell as South Park would eventually evolve over time that they have one simple rule in regards to writing, and that's to when you're coming up with a story, you should always have every plot point should start with but then or therefore, because if your plot point ever cuts to and then this happens, and then your story is completely fucked. Because you can tell like some of those earlier episodes kind of did suffer from that whole like problem that, I just mentioned, where like this happens and then this happens and then this happens. Trey's whole like philosophy or strategy is that your story should always go, this happens, but then this happens, therefore this happens, or something along those lines.
Right. They should always be
And I think
connected.
be connected. It should never waste any time. And that's something I really noticed with this movie, especially rewatching it, is that every scene, flows leads to the next in a proper way. Even some of the funny scenes, like I noticed that like the whole like song where like Cartman's like singing about how Kyle's mom's a bitch. Like you think that would just be some kind of like filler scene or something like that, but it actually leads to Cartman getting the V chip planted in his head at the very next scene. So even stuff like that still serves a purpose. I think even Trey and Matt even said in the audio commentary for the movie that every song serves a purpose in the movie. The only one you could probably make an exception for is It's Easy MK.
Yeah, I can see that. But yeah, no, that's great advice for writing, honestly. Yeah, it should build from the previous scene to keep the flow going. It's amazing how many writers should hear that advice, because you think it'd be one of those.
I think it was after working on this movie that when they started writing for Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, that they eventually like were starting to learn more about character and story structure and that kind of thing. Because you can even looking back at their first couple of films, like Cannibal the Musical and Orgasmo, you can tell there's sort of a low budget sort of amateur charm to them.
Yeah,
but they're not there though.
Oh yeah, Cannibal the Musical was pretty rough. I remember when we watched it, because it was funny at times, but then after a while the jokes weren't hitting as hard, and it's because the way it was told story wise, it got old and really just the pacing was not there. Obviously it was their first thing ever, so duh.
Yeah, pretty much. But I forgot to mention one thing. Speaking of the title Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, the original title they came up with for the movie was South Park All Hell Breaks Loose, but the MPAA didn't allow them to use hell in the title. So they came up with an alternative title, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, and the MPAA approved it, not realizing that the title was just one big dick innuendo.
Exactly.
So it was like 1 week later. One week later, they were like, "Hey, you can't have that as your title anymore." But I think it was like their producer that basically told them, "Nope, too late. We're printing all the posters out. The marketing's already started, so you can't change it now."
They're so fucking stupid, the MPAA. My God, it's so obviously a dick joke. Even as a kid, when I knew about this movie, I knew it was a dick joke. Like, they're so fucking stupid. Yeah, at that point, it's too late. So good. I'm glad.
But I like that title better, though.
It is a good title.
I'm glad that happened.
Yeah, it is a good title because it is very emblematic, not only of the fact that it is a bigger movie, like a bigger story for the South Park characters, but yeah, it's also just simply just a dick joke. It's perfect.
It is, yeah. It's really interesting. You have no idea how weird and fascinating it is looking back at this movie, when seeing South Park in its infancy, before all these other major characters were introduced through the show, like Butters. I think Butters was a background character in this movie.
Yes.
But he didn't have a single line, and I don't think he was even named Butters until like a few episodes after this movie came out. So
okay.
He was just some random background character. And then as they started developing him more, they called him Butters, which they named him after the animation director at the time, Eric Stow. And also even Randy, who was like such a major character that the creators are obsessed with nowadays, only has like a single line in this movie, which you have no idea how weird that is.
That is weird. Now. No, even because I grew up watching the South Park episodes, and I remember Randy and Butters playing a much bigger role in those episodes. Whereas here, yeah, they get like one line, and yeah, that was weird. Yeah, Butters doesn't even say anything, which is funny because Butters was one of my favorite characters. Butters was my nickname in middle school because my friends who were huge South Park fans would call me Butters. Because I reminded them.
That's interesting.
I was such a loser. I reminded them of Butters. So,
Butters in my eyes is like the Rich Evans of the South Park cast of characters.
That's a very accurate description. Yes.
But they both are some Randy. I know Randy gets a lot of hate nowadays too because of how overused he got in later seasons. But he still has some of the funniest and most iconic moments in the entire show.
Yeah,
And
maybe it was like a
even
later season thing because I remember him being in episodes and not hating him. I actually thought he was pretty funny in those episodes. But yeah,
oh yeah,
I guess it was more overuse in later episodes. Sure.
yeah. There's a good video that Alice Mark did about how Randy came from love to hated, which I think is worth checking out because because Randy was one of the most beloved characters at one point. And he kind of, as the series went on, they kind of overused him, and he just became, he became tiresome after a while. But even with that said, he still has some of the funniest and most memorable moments in the entire show, and
Yeah.
I think it would be a lesser show without him. So
Yeah, I feel like, there are characters on The Simpsons that I would get tired of, but that doesn't take away from when they were actually genuinely funny,
Also, I think it was around this time, Randy was a much different character too in the earlier seasons of South Park. He was basically kind of just a generic sort of stern father to Stan, but like as they developed him later on, especially in season 9 with the episode The Losing Edge, they kind of made him into just a kind of a giant doofus who always did the dumbest stuff imaginable. But I think it made him more interesting and funny, I'd say, and added more humor to the show. And even after like Chef left the show, they could always, when they didn't have a plot idea for something that revolved around the boys, they could just use Randy as a character for some kind of story.
Which makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, by the way, isn't it funny seeing how Chef is in this movie and like he hasn't been in the show for like almost 20 years now?
Yeah, because he's one. I guess he was one of those characters that was used a lot, and then I know Isaac Hayes left the show, and then he died in 2008. So there's that. What is the Isaac Hayes story with leaving South? He left South Park before he died.
Yeah, I actually made a video on that, but yeah, he basically. They made a video poking fun at. They made an episode poking fun at Scientology. And so I think he suffered a stroke, and the Scientology friends pulled him out of the show, and he died a couple years after that.
So it's one of those situations. Yes.
Then they made an episode about how he left and how he was brainwashed by a cult. So it's one of those things.
That's so sad. That's not
sad,
that's not unlike what happened to Phil Hartman's characters on The Simpsons. How they had to stop. They had to stop using him because he got murdered, and he wasn't alive anymore to do those characters. But that's incredibly sad that happened. Regardless,
yeah.
So, yeah, man, it's always a shame. Yeah, Chef was fun to see because Chef, I do remember being a major character in a lot of early episodes. I would see. And he is funny here. I love Chef.
You like the part when he's part of the military and like the whole leader has this whole plan to have all the black soldiers being killed before all the other white military soldiers in the army, and Chef just points that out to him and goes like, "Have you ever heard of the Emancipation Proclamation?" And he's like, "I've never listened to hip hop."
It's so funny. Yeah. Remember Operation Get Behind the Darkies. It's like, okay, they know what they're doing with that joke. Which I think it is based off of real military I don't know off the top of my head if it is actually based off of real military action, but I would not be surprised if in a lot of early wars they would put, a lot of black soldiers towards the forefront to be like, you guys are the first brigade. It's like, why is that? So,
yeah.
But either way, it is really funny. Yeah, the Emancipation Proclamation joke is so funny.
Then after that is when they realize that the whole machine that they're using to, the whole virtual thing that they're trying to show as an example of how to go out on the battlefield after it starts working. It's like, stupid Windows 98, get Bill Gates in here. They fucking shoot him.
Yeah, that was
that is one of the best moments.
So
did you like the Conan O'Brien moment when Conan O'Brien's he's actually the one that gets Terrence and Phillip captured?
Yeah,
because because the moms like ambush them.
Yeah.
And like Terrence and Phillip were like, but Conan, you watched the movie with us, you liked it. And
Yeah.
Conan's like, what have I done? And he just jumps out the window and dies.
I love that's a great thing to bring up, because a lot of the celebrities in this movie are either, they're not voiced by themselves, but they're voiced by other celebrities, some of them. So obviously, Conan is in this movie. It's not Conan O'Brien doing the voice. It's Brent Spiner, Data on Star Trek, who voices him, which is hilarious. And then you have Brooke Shields, who is also voiced by another famous actress, that being Minnie Driver, but it's not Brooke Shields. So I just think that's really funny that they're taking these famous actors and playing these other famous actors, because I guess they didn't approve of their, because I think that is during the credits they say like, oh, these certain celebrities did not approve of their portrayal in this movie, but they still put
I
them in
did
the
see
movie.
that too.
Yeah,
that's the thing with South Park in general too, is they make fun of celebrities all the time.
Oh,
They
yeah,
never,
of course.
they obviously never bring up, they never have the celebrities voice themselves, because they probably wouldn't approve of that.
right.
Although they do have actual big actors in the movie itself, though. They have George Clooney, who makes a small cameo.
Yeah, he's the
They have
doctor.
Eric Idle.
Yeah, Eric Idle is the other doctor.
The whole George Clooney part, when like they're trying to bring, because Kenny dies by like, he tries to light his fart on fire, but then he burns to death, and they're trying to bring him back. And like they use a baked potato, and they're like, and as soon as he wakes up, they're like, you have a we replaced your heart with a baked potato. You have 5 seconds to live.
Yeah, and then he just explodes. It's so good that that's George Clooney. It never gets any easier.
And, that's actually not George Clooney's first appearance in South Park, though.
Yeah, he voices a dog, right?
He does in the 4th episode in season 1, and all he does is bark noises.
Yeah, hilarious. That's so funny.
Which is really funny.
Yeah.
And then I think they would go on to like kind of rip on George Clooney in season 10. There's this whole episode called Smug Alert, where they basically make fun of his smug Oscar speech.
Oh.
And it causes this whole smug. They personify this fog that pollutes the entire town of South Park as this like really smug fog. That's comes from like really smug celebrities. So that's kind of a whole gag in that episode. But
when was season 10?
Season 10 would have been 2006.
2006. Okay, yeah. What Oscar speech?
So it would have been an Oscar speech. It would have been an Oscar speech from presumably that same year.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't know enough Oscar history to know like what his speech was on. I mean, if it's a celebrity being pretentious, I can imagine a few options for that. So, which is so funny. But that's great that, they would make fun of him later on. I mean, showing that South Park truly does have no biases. They will make fun of anybody.
Yeah, pretty much. They've even basically they also ruined everyone else's night at the Oscars when Trey and Matt went to the Academy Awards the following year after this movie premiered, because they were nominated for an Oscar for Best Original Song for Blame Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And so Trey and Matt have gone on record saying they award shows are basically everything that they go against. So they basically thought, well, if it's the Oscars and they're inviting us, we probably should go, but we should probably fuck with them in some kind of way.
Yeah.
So their original idea was to go in duck costumes, but they realized if they did that, they probably wouldn't let them inside. So they decided to just go in gowns and put on some wigs, take some LSD, and that's how they went to the red carpet premiere of the Academy Awards.
Just so funny. But good, they should. I'm glad that they were able to do that. Yeah, and well, they didn't end up winning.
They probably pissed off everyone else they pissed off everyone else that night, because it was like, oh, it's my big night, and they're just like, I don't care. Yeah.
Which, honestly, that's emblematic of my thoughts on the Oscars too. So good for them.
Yeah. Yeah, they've mocked award shows in general too. There's I don't mean to go on too many tangents, but there's I remember after South Park won an Emmy award for, I forget what episode they won an Emmy for, but they made fun of that fact in an episode where called More Crap, where Randy is trying to win the Guinness World Record for the biggest crap ever taken, and all the scenes where he's trying to take a crap, it cuts to a text on screen that says, "This is for an Emmy award winning series."
Good. Yeah, no, but again, that's why, even though I've not watched a ton of South Park, I still respect them because they truly do make fun of everybody. And I think that is an important thing to be, you should be willing to
Comfortable doing.
you should be comfortable with making fun of anything. I am of the opinion that you can joke about anything. Are there stipulations, and should you be making fun of everything all the time? No, you're obviously going to piss off a lot of people when you do make fun of everything. But I think you should still be able to, regardless of what anybody else says,
Yeah. If you want to go back to how far back this movie came out, I remember there's this whole story during the audio commentary too, where I remember they lost the entire crew for a day, because it was May 19th when most of the crew left work to go see the new Star Wars movie at the time. And apparently they when all of them came back from the movie, they all told Trey and Matt didn't go, but all the other crew members just came back to tell them how much the movie sucked.
Yes, that's so funny. That's the Star Wars story you wanted to tell.
Yeah, that's I was gonna tell you because I was originally gonna see. I know that there's actually a Phantom Menace screening in my town, but apparently I thought it was at 7 p.m. later tonight. Apparently it was at 2 p.m. though, so I'm missing it for this. But
whoops,
this is more important though.
Yeah, you could always watch Phantom Menace on Disney Plus, if you truly want to.
Trey and Matt also went on to make fun of George Lucas, even after this movie came out, in a couple of episodes too.
Yeah,
and also Steven Spielberg.
I think I remember that episode because I remember there was an episode where they did a special edition of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then the ending of that episode is like the ending of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where everybody gets their faces melted off.
Their faces melt off
because the Raiders special edition is so bad, like their faces just melt off, which is really funny. That's really, really funny.
I know. You know what's an interesting fact about that is I think that Steven Spielberg was actually planning on doing an alternate version of Raiders of the Lost Ark, around that same time too. But I think after the episode aired, he might have changed his mind on that, and I think it was partially influenced because of the South Park episode.
Yeah.
So I think if you have anything to partially thank for preventing a Raiders of the Lost Ark special edition, you have South Park to thank for that.
I would also like to imagine it's because the E.T. special edition was such a gigantic failure too, where he replaced the guns with walkie-talkies and everyone was like, what the fuck are you doing? And so he's like, all right, guys, never mind. And then when the Blu-ray of E.T. came out, it was back to normal, which that's a great lesson. Spielberg listened. Lucas didn't, but that's here nor there.
Yeah. Did you ever notice, I'm not sure if you would have noticed, but there's actually a lot of series callbacks in this film. You probably wouldn't know them, but I can break down some of them for you.
Yeah, break down some of them, because then maybe I'll be able to tell.
There is, I noticed a couple of Easter eggs I noticed. I remember, when they were coming out of the theater, at the beginning, when they were seeing Terrence and Phillip Asses of Fire, one of the posters had a Mecha Streisand poster, called Mecha Streisand takes on New York or something like that. It was a reference to a season 10 episode where they made fun of Barbra Streisand.
Yeah.
Because I know that Trey and Matt have often said that they don't actively hate most of the celebrities they make fun of, although they do hate Barbra Streisand.
I mean, Barbra Streisand, yeah. I mean, she literally invented the term, the Streisand effect, where if you try to turn people away from something, that's only going to make them focus on it even more. So I can understand that perfectly, even though I'm not as well versed in Streisand as a celebrity. But yeah, no, I can believe that they don't actively hate everybody they make fun of. I think they're literally just trying to make jokes, which, that's perfectly reasonable.
There's also a lot of different stuff. I've mentioned before, the whole song where Cartman sings about how Kyle's mom's a bitch. That's a callback to the Mr. Hanky episode.
Okay.
There's I mentioned the whole Brian Boitano thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has a lot of stuff in there for fans, but it's also a fantastic movie in and of itself.
Yeah.
What did you think of the whole Saddam Hussein and Satan subplot.
I mean, it's really funny because it's Satan and Saddam Hussein, you know, it's literally just his face photoshopped over a character, and like his lips move kind of like how the Canadians talk in the series. It's
Oh
hilarious.
yeah.
Um, but then yeah, the actual joke. So that in and of itself is a joke, but then the jokes that they tell as a couple are also incredibly funny too.
Yeah, and like it's Satan's kind of like interpreted as sort of a soft character in this film because he's in a toxic relationship with
Hmm.
Saddam Hussein, when all he wants to do is have sex with him.
Yeah.
And I have to say, one of my that whole moment, especially the up there sequence, like the musical sequence where he's like talking about how he wants to go up to the surface. Not only is that a great parody of like a lot of the Disney Renaissance films around, from earlier in that same decade,
Hmm.
but it's also a great song lyrically.
Oh yeah.
The because I know it's kind of hard to take seriously a song about Satan, singing about how he wants to go up to the surface. It sounds very silly, but
Yes.
lyrically, I mean, and musically, it sounds beautiful,
Yeah. Oh,
as well
definitely.
as most of the songs in this film. That whole like La Resistance song is like a whole like song about everyone coming together from different from all the scenes that came before and all the different musical sequences. Like the parents come together to sing. Satan comes to sing. It's a great sequence, an amazing one at that. That whole La Resistance music scene, which I think is probably one of the top two scenes in the entire movie, in my opinion, at least.
Hmm.
What is your favorite song from the movie?
Oh man, what would be my favorite song? Let me think on that. I think, do I want to say Blame Canada or Kyle's Mom's a Bitch? Those are probably up there for me. Um uh, Fuck, it's really hard to choose because I think those are really good, and I think I'm going to just say uh I can't choose between those two. They're just so good because they're both really funny, but also are really well written. You know?
Yeah, I get that. My top two are La Resistance and Up There, unless you're counting the Eyes of a Child song I talked about earlier, but
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
that would easily be a top three for me. The funny thing is, Blame Canada was nominated for the award that following year, but
Hmm.
it's actually not even my favorite song in the movie, which is testament to how great the soundtrack
Oh,
is.
totally, totally. I mean, yeah, usually when it comes to the songs that get nominated for Oscars, it's always never really the best song. Um, I feel like that happens to a lot of movies. Although I'm not mad that Blame Canada got nominated. That it's, you know what? That's the perfect song to get nominated.
And I guess it does make sense how I want to say that Trey actually he had a minor in poetry
Mm.
when he graduated from college. So I think that kind of contributed to the his really good songwriting skills, for this film. And also he would go on to write. He and Matt Stone would go on to write the songs and also create one of the most popular Broadway musicals of all time, The Book of Mormon,
Yeah.
which is really good as well, but not as good as the South Park movie. But I keep
Right.
saying that.
Yeah,
So
but I mean that just shows you how talented these guys are, that they can make
yeah,
a Broadway show that's seen as one of the greatest of all time, and it's the same guys who made South Park, you know?
yeah, that is really interesting too, and it really does show because they're basically kind of well versed in almost every talent. They're writers, they're directors, they're musicians, they're animators. Like, I wish I was that fucking talented,
I know.
honestly.
Yeah, it's awesome. So whenever I see people kind of dismiss South Park as kind of this like, I don't know, raunchy show, and I get it, it is raunchy, but these guys are obviously incredibly talented, and you need to be if you're going to pull off this raunchy show that's still running to this day. There's obviously some sort of insane talent going on behind the scenes, you know?
Of course. And also too, the thing is, I think that some people would probably assume that the raunchy sense of humor that comes from South Park is done just for attention and shock value. But if you look at like the behind the scenes or like the commentaries themselves, and you hear like Trey and Matt talk about it, uh, it doesn't. I mean, it obviously it more so comes off that's just genuinely their sense of humor. That
Yeah.
that whole 6 Days to Air documentary where like they're watching like where they're making an episode about Kyle being conjoined into a human Sentai pad where they're like shitting into his mouth. You just see how hard they're laughing at that.
Yeah.
That's just genuinely in their sense of humor.
Yeah, that sounds like closer
even
to
if it
my
doesn't
sense of
appeal
humor
to
too.
everyone.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm definitely somebody who has a much darker sense of humor than I would say our friends, and that's fine, But I'm not one of those people that just likes offensive humor for the sake of offensive humor. I like it because it genuinely makes me laugh. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that because if it makes you laugh, it makes you laugh. You shouldn't be really ashamed of that. And plus, yeah, like you said, there's also sometimes something deeper to that. Like the offensive humor in this movie has a point. It's to show that they can be as raunchy as they want and it doesn't fucking matter,
And it's also an anti-censorship movie
Right.
too, so that's kind of the whole point. Of it being raunchy and pretty profane.
Yeah. And plus, you're always going to have somebody who has differing levels of being offended by something. Something that I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't be offended by. There's going to be one or two people who are going to be offended by it. It's like, okay, are we really going to placate to these one or two people as a group? It's like, we got to be realistic at a certain point,
Yeah. One note I forgot to mention is that I mentioned earlier before that Butters. I mentioned before that his most prominent role in the movie is like during the La Resistance song,
Mm-hmm.
where like where he trips at the end with the flag in his hands.
Yeah.
But I do realize though, if he had a more active role in the rebellion against the parents, I think his own parents probably would have grounded him.
Oh yeah, totally.
I don't know if you knew this, but there's this whole like running gag in South Park about how his parents are always so unnecessarily cruel to him.
Yeah, I do vaguely remember episodes he was on where his parents were like super strict.
By the way, did you remember like the whole sequence with Big Gay Al when he's doing the whole like show at the end before they execute Terrence and Phillip?
That scene also gets me. That's probably also one of my favorite songs is I'm super, thanks for asking. It's so funny.
Which in itself is just kind of a insane concept to basically just have this whole spectacle before you're about to execute people that you dislike.
Yeah.
That's pretty insane for America to do. So, I think that's kind of something funny to comment on.
Yeah.
But also, I think the whole sequence where you see like Big Gay Al's like dick at the end, that was pretty insane to see.
Yeah.
Because I don't think even South Park itself, the show, would even get away with that. And trust me, South Park has gotten away with a ton of insane stuff before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's why you do that in the movie, because you can show nudity in movies. That's why the Simpsons movie did it. You can see Bart's dick for a couple seconds.
Yeah.
Which means when Family Guy eventually makes their movie, they have to have full frontal nudity at one point.
I remember listening to the audio commentary for that part yesterday, and like you could tell that like Trey and Matt, like when they were doing the commentary for its like 10th anniversary, they hadn't seen the movie since its premiere, and so when they saw the dick shot, they were like, "Oh yeah, I forgot all about that."
Now that's a flex that they just put nudity and forgot about it, so they're just like, "Oh yeah, I guess we did that. Cool."
They do so much stuff with South Park. They probably don't even remember half the stuff they made before.
Oh yeah, I guarantee that. Yeah, that sounds.
That's just
right.
A part of getting older. So.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. There's probably jokes I've made on this podcast I don't even remember.
Definitely. Did you like the subplot too, where like Stan like is trying to be a good like ladies man to Wendy, and like there's this like British kid, like this transfer student.
He's trying to find the clitoris.
Up all the attention, and he's trying to find the clitoris.
Yeah, that rules. And then the clitoris does come to him. The clitoris
does show up, and she just says, "Chicks love confidence, man."
Yeah, which is good advice. But it's obviously still played out as a joke, because it is funny, because it's so stupidly simple. He's going through all this trouble to try and impress Wendy when it's like, just be yourself, just be confident, be who you are. But he's still going like, I'm trying to find the clitoris. Oh, it's just so funny. Yeah,
And at the end,
you get a giant clitoris at the end. It's so funny.
and at the end too, when like at the end too, like Wendy basically dumps Gregory, and she's like, and when Stan asks her about it, she's like, I never liked Gregory. Fuck Gregory, and he's like, yay.
Yeah. Yeah. So funny.
The ending war scene especially, I do have to highlight how really good the animation in that too, despite how rough the construction paper style of it is, intentionally so, but
Yeah.
the war sequence at the end is really good.
Yeah, South Park does have a simplistic style to it, but it's a style nonetheless. And I'm totally fine with it because it kind of adds to the comedy, just the way the characters move. Yeah, at this point you can't even call it bad. It's part of the style. That's the point. But yeah, you're right. That ending sequence it rules.
And it makes it more interesting when it does bring in like different visual styles, not even just within the movie, but also the show itself. You know, when it does go to more stylized or like different animation styles at points.
Yeah, which I do remember them doing. I mean, like I said, one of my favorite episodes is the one where they're anime characters.
Yeah, it's really good though. Like a lot of the visuals and gags in this movie. That's why I think that too, because this is probably one of my favorite animated movies ever now. Probably because I am a big South Park fan,
right?
But also because I do think that this is probably up there as one of the best animated musicals of all time, and I do mean that sincerely. I'm probably gonna get a lot of shit for this.
I agree, though.
I think this is. Oh, you do?
Yeah, okay. I agree. I think this is up there for animated musicals for me. You know, because when I think of something like the Simpsons movie, I like the Simpsons movie, but only because I'm such a diehard Simpsons fan. And even then, I don't love it. I think in terms of it being a Simpsons movie, it leaves a lot to be desired. Whereas with the South Park movie, I feel
the same way, actually.
I feel like the South Park movie does things really, really well. Like, yeah, separate it from the fact that it's a movie adaptation of the show. Separated from that, it's still just a genuinely fun animated musical. And so, yeah, I have no problems calling it. I don't know if it is my all-time favorite animated musical, though. I think when it comes to animated musicals, I am more partial to the Disney Renaissance films that I grew up watching. Nightmare Before Christmas is probably one I always go to when I think of my favorite animated musical. Just because I feel like that's a unique one. But honestly, if I really had to think about it, I wouldn't be surprised if South Park was in my top 10, you know?
Yeah, actually, I'm probably gonna get a lot of shit for this, but I actually think this is a better musical than the Disney Renaissance films after The Lion King. I know that's a hot take.
I don't think so. Because obviously after Lion King you get Pocahontas. I mean, come on, it's Pocahontas.
It's a bad musical. There's only people only talk about one song ever, and I don't even remember the name of the song that they talk about all the time. So what does that tell you? I think it's Colors of the Wind. But if you put a gun up to my head, I cannot tell you the lyrics to that song. So.
They say "Colors of the Wind" in the song, I think. Hunchback's a bit of a cult classic. I'll give you that. Hercules and Mulan are certainly beloved, but again, I wouldn't say on the same level as something like Beauty and the Beast or Aladdin or Little Mermaid. And then Tarzan, I personally like. I get a lot of personal enjoyment out of Tarzan, but that's also not technically a musical. It is, but it's a little weird. It's in the same sense that the Muppets from Space counts, I guess, but it also doesn't because it's not. The characters don't sing themselves. It's mostly a lot of just songs they play. So I get it. Honestly, I don't think that's a hot take, but I agree with you. I think South Park is a better movie musical than anything after Lion King. It has tough competition when you put it up against Aladdin, Lion King, and Beauty and the Beast. So, but
I like and Hunchback as musicals, and also Hercules. I think that's a lot of good songs, but I think like the best songs from the South Park movie, in my opinion, are better than any of those movies. Which
I still
They
like
have
those
some
movies
bangers in
too.
there, too.
Yeah, I still like Hercules, Hunchback, and Mulan a lot. I definitely consider those some of my favorite Disney movies. But I mean, the fact that I can put South Park in competition with them, that says a lot about South Park, the movie. Like, it's the fact that it is that good.
And even has that whole like the rendition of the Brian Boitano song at the end where they're like,
Mhm.
Brian, those chicken wings are really spicy. Don't eat those.
It's so funny. Chicken wing. Yeah,
But
no,
I think
this movie rules.
which character is actually more evil than Satan in this movie?
I know, but
That
you
doesn't
go ahead.
include Saddam Hussein.
Yeah, you go ahead. You say who it is.
Pal's mom.
Yeah. Sheila Brofonsky. What's
She's
their last
such a
name?
bitch. Sheila Broflovsky.
Broflovsky. Whatever. Yeah, Sheila. Yeah, Kyle's mom. Huge bitch. Absolutely. Yeah. No. To an insane degree.
Even all the other kids agree. I remember like in the Mr. Hanky episode too, that when Kyle was singing it, or no, it was Cartman who was singing it in front of Kyle, and all the other kids were like listening on and smiling. Even Mr. Garrison was there and didn't say anything. Like he agreed with him.
Yeah.
Because she's right. Because Cartman's right.
Yeah, she is a huge bitch. And again, I understand the basics of what she's going for, as I would with people who are like that in real life, where they're like, I'm thinking of the children. I just want what's best for the children. It's like, yeah, I think most normal people in the world would agree with that sentiment. We want to protect our children. It's just the way she goes about it makes her a gigantic, disgusting bitch.
At the expense of giving their own children attention.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, there's a great scene where they're at like the burning of all the Canadian and Terrence and Phillip memorabilia in the center of town, and the kids are trying to talk to them, and they're actively ignoring them, going like, "We want what's best for our children." Like, just in that few seconds, it just shows you the hypocrisy of what they're doing.
Even the ending scene too was like a great encapsulation of the whole themes of the movie. Where like, when all the kids are like go up to Terrence and Phillip to protect them from getting shot or whatever, and like Kyle's like he has this whole speech because every single one of the four boys in the movie kind of has their own arc or thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like Stan has the whole thing with Wendy, Cartman has the whole V chip planted in his head, Kenny is the one who basically helps Satan overcome his abusive relationship with Saddam. But Kyle's the one who basically stands up to his mom and basically just tells her that, well, when you're mad about me watching all this inappropriate stuff, you go off blaming everyone else when you should be mad at me.
Yeah,
and that's a good message to send to parents.
Yeah, and he even says like, I don't want. What does he say? He says like, I don't want such and such.
I want my mom back.
Yeah, I want my mom back. Exactly. Like, I don't care that you're doing all of this for me. I just want you to pay attention to me. Exactly. Yeah. It's a totally great lesson to learn.
It's a beautiful moment, too. And
yeah.
all the other soldiers are crying like,
yeah, it is a great lesson to learn. And people who don't want to look beyond what South Park is doing because, they make fart jokes and they make the kids say fuck all the time. It's like, they're not going to pay attention to that. They're just going to be like, oh, it's a raunchy movie for the sake of being raunchy. It's like, well, it says more about you than it does the actual movie.
Some of my favorite South Park moments of all time are actually some of the more emotional, poignant moments, actually. Mm-hmm. I can get to those maybe at the end when I recommend a few episodes, but yeah, like there's a lot of great emotional stuff in this film. The last shot with Kenny, like finally getting his angel wings and going up to heaven when he was rejected from going up to heaven before in the movie, was kind of beautiful and triumphant.
Yeah, which first of all,
it was a really great last shot.
That's a great joke. How he's going up to heaven, and then you see like heaven population not even 1,000 or something. Yeah, and then he goes down to hell, and it's just continuously in the trillions,
500 million billions.
Yeah. That's a great joke. But also just going up to heaven, it's just a bunch of naked chicks. Like, that's so funny.
It's fitting for Kenny's character because, well, in the show, Kenny has a thing for titties. Oh, I also like I like the opening joke with Kenny too. The whole opening scene where Kenny's like where he's like going to see the movie, and like his mom is like, "All right, fine, you go ahead and miss church, and when you die, you can answer to Satan." And he's like, "Okay,"
Yeah,
and
okay.
then he just leaves.
And then he answers to Satan in the movie. So how about that?
I think I realized why it's funny now is he's used to dying every day though. So
That's true. Yeah, that is his running gag. Is oh my god, they killed Kenny, you bastards.
yeah. This actually was not the last time that Saddam Hussein was on South Park, though. Actually,
I believe that Saddam Hussein didn't die until 2006, right?
yeah. The thing is, though, is that even though he was still alive when this film came out, they did say earlier on in the film that Saddam Hussein was killed by a pack of wolves.
Yeah,
So
hilarious. But yeah, he didn't die until 2006 because that's when he got executed, if I'm remembering correctly.
yeah, but he's dead in the South Park universe.
Mm-hmm.
But even though he basically died at the end of this film, he actually appeared in a few episodes of the show after the film came out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was in the 2-part special. Do the handicapped go to hell? And probably, which in season 4, which is like a year later.
Yeah,
And it kind of continues the whole story around. I think Satan is dating another guy now. And Saddam is trying to convince him to get back with him. At the very end, Saddam is like sent up to heaven, but only to be annoyed by all the Mormons up there.
It's so funny. Again, they don't care whose toes they step on.
Yeah, and I think the last episode he was in was Ladder to Heaven, which is like season 6, which would be like nearly over 20 years ago by now. But so who knows if they'll ever come? Who knows if they'll ever bring him back though? But never say never.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I did want to talk about the Blu-ray I have for this film. I actually own this film on 4K now, but because I actually got it after we watched it in the server back in November. I decided to buy it on 4K since why not?
Yeah, that was November we watched it. I remember that was the first time I'd watched it in years, and that's when I raised the score because I was like, "Oh, this rules so much more than I gave it credit for initially." So
I was excited because I was wondering if you're gonna lower the score
or
raise it, but you raised it. I was like, cool.
Yeah, and I'm keeping it at a 9 out of 10 because it is genuinely that good. I love this movie. So yeah,
this is one of the best. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I love it. It's so good. But anyway, sorry, you go ahead.
I was gonna say I still think this is easily, at least if not the number one, I think it's at least in the top 2 best movies based on animated shows. At least American wise, but because I don't know, because you're talking about before how like you had some mixed feelings about the Simpsons movie. I kind of feel the same way, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I don't know. I feel like when I hear about a Simpsons movie, I don't know. I feel like I expect better from it.
Yeah, I mean, granted, it came out in 2007. The golden age was long gone, so I don't blame it. I just think when it comes to what it is, it's not horrible by any means, but yeah, when you think of the Simpsons movie, I don't know, it's not as good as maybe the Simpsons were in the early 90s, which, again, the golden age was long gone at that point. The magic was gone, but for what it is, I think it's fine. But yeah, when it comes to South Park, the South Park movie, this, I think, is way more emblematic of what the show's about, and also just is a genuinely good movie on its own.
Yeah, I do. My issues with the Simpsons movie more stem from like you can kind of tell it's from the era after the Golden Age where they did kind of Flanderize Homer, in my opinion.
Yeah,
and also I don't know. I feel like this plot could have been done for a 22-minute episode. Where I feel like with the South Park movie, the whole plot against Canada, that could only be done for, if not like if you could have done it for maybe a 2-part special, you certainly couldn't have done it for a 22-minute episot though.
No, definitely not. Yeah, this is very much a cinematic feeling movie. You said not top 1, but maybe top 2. What else do you think like it's going in terms of like, I don't know, TV to movie adaptation, or do you not know? You just
the only other one I can think of is probably the first SpongeBob movie.
Oh, fuck. Yeah, no, that is tough competition. I think that might be my favorite one because I genuinely fucking love that movie.
Yeah. I know some people have problems with the first SpongeBob movie because It does sidelight a lot of characters like Sandy or
Mhm.
Mrs. Puff or Pearl or whatever. In my eyes, I think that even though, yeah, that is kind of a nitpicky flaw
Mhm.
that could have been improved. I feel like in the grand scheme of things, though, that probably was the right decision, though,
Oh yeah.
because it helped the story become more focused, though.
Yeah,
I think even Trey and Matt said, for the audio commentary for this movie that if they were to make another South Park movie, that they would probably focus on a fewer amount of characters to keep the story, focused. Not that this movie isn't focused in terms of story, but
Mhm.
if they were to come up with another story, they'd rather just focus on a few characters rather than everyone.
Yeah, which I feel like, yeah, I agree. I think the focus is still very good in the first South Park movie. I think the characters who need to be major are major, and the ones that don't show up as often, they didn't need to show up anymore. Like they had I feel like every character gets the chance that they need to shine.
Or were you gonna say something before, by the way?
Mm, no, I just love the SpongeBob movie.
About the SpongeBob movie?
It's a great movie. I fucking love it. Every time I watch it, I have a huge dumb smile on my face. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, South Park, same thing. But yeah, you were going to talk about the Blu-ray of South Park because I have it on DVD. I think this is the original DVD release from 1999 of the movie, which
Mm.
is awesome. But yeah, go. You had some things you wanted to say about the Blu-ray?
Yeah, I think the 4K Blu-ray disc is fine.
Mm-hmm.
I think it works pretty well, but I did notice that I feel like the colors are kind of muted on the 4K disc I played it on.
Mm.
I don't know if I haven't played a 4K Blu-ray on my TV in a while, but it's just something I kind of picked up on.
Mm.
And if you want to play it on the Blu-ray disc that comes with it as well, it plays these English subtitles every time a musical song comes up because apparently the Blu-ray disc is only the sing-along version.
Mm.
So I can't just watch it in case like I go to a friend's house or something where they only have a Blu-ray player. I can only play the Blu-ray disc which has like the sing-along version that comes with the movie, but what if I don't want that? Why not just give me an option to have the sing-along subtitles off, you know?
Yeah, that is a weird decision to have, but I guess I kind of get it. I guess that means if you're going to buy the 4K, you should have incentive to have a 4K player. But it's like, yeah, like you said, if you're going to a friend's house who doesn't have a 4K player, yeah, that is weird.
I'd assume most people don't have 4K players, so
Yeah, I mean, in my, to me, I definitely don't come across a lot of people with 4K players, but I always recommend them because you can play literally any disc. You know, even though I have a 4K player, I play a lot of DVDs on it,
yeah, exactly.
but they are incredibly expensive. So, you know, only if you really feel like you need it do I recommend it.
I think it's interesting though that even despite this movie's financial and critical success, there has not been another South Park movie since then.
Hmm.
They actually initially conceived the Imagination Land trilogy in season 11 as another potential South Park movie, but they felt like the story didn't support a feature film enough.
Hmm.
And also, I imagine the use of copyrighted characters would have made it a hell to get through.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't think they should be feel pressured into doing another one if they really don't want to. You know, because you always hear people being like, "Oh, when's the next Simpsons movie coming out?" And honestly, it always feels as though they're trying to come up with a concept that they just can't. And it's like, honestly, if you truly can't come up with something that will top the first one or at least be on the same level as the first one, I don't think you should feel pressured into doing it. I think you should have what the one because it's that special and you don't really need another one. So I think in the long run that's smarter that they didn't make it a movie. Like they just kept it as yeah, like you said, a trilogy of like specials, right?
Yeah, they've had a lot of different like trilogies and two-part specials where like you could theoretically make them into feature films, but I assume the reason why they haven't really made many movies after this came out was probably because of time. Like
Mm-hmm.
making South Park every year probably causes them a lot of stress and work. And I imagine working on a movie like in between their times off from South Park would probably, make production even more hectic. So
Absolutely, yeah.
that's
So
my best guess.
yeah, I'd be fine if they never ever made another South Park movie, because if this is the only one we get, it fucking rocks. So,
I don't think they could top it either.
mission accomplished. Exactly. Yeah, I don't think they can.
Because look what happened with the SpongeBob movies. The first one's great. The rest of them, not as great.
Yeah, I have a soft spot for Sponge Out of Water, but yeah, Sponge on the Run, woof, and Sandy Cheeks, woof. Like woof to the max, those movies. Ay. I didn't even grow up with Sponge Out of Water. I'm an adult. I was an adult. No, I wasn't technically an adult. I was technically 17 when that movie came out, but I was definitely over modern SpongeBob at that time. But even I liked Sponge Out of Water. I'm like, yeah, this is fun. But then, yeah, compared to the first one, no. I think the magic was definitely gone at that point. But
I remember seeing Sponge Out of Water when it came out, though, and like a lot of the parents I saw it with hated it.
I mean, yes, because that's the thing with parents.
Yeah,
they're not into SpongeBob the way our generation is. Like, they just see it as this dumb, stupid cartoon. Which I've been rewatching a bunch of early episodes of SpongeBob. It fucking rules. The jokes that show does, the storytelling, these are genuinely really funny. Like the early SpongeBob, I know I sound like a sponge boomer, whatever the fuck the animation community comes up with when it comes to, oh, you just like old SpongeBob, you don't like the later episodes, which correct, because watching these older episodes, it's beyond nostalgia. These actually fucking rule.
Yeah, I'm super nostalgic for them, but it's like, it is one of those like cartoons from what I watched when I was a kid that I liked because it was silly and fun. But then when I grew up, and I realized, oh yeah, this is why it was so popular, though, because it was really smart and clever.
Yeah, it is very smart, those early SpongeBobs. So, and yeah, so I again, that kind of applies to South Park. You look at it from a distance, and I know plenty of adults that would just look at it as like this stupid, raunchy show, but there is something there.
A lot of the jokes that I watched from episodes when I was younger completely went over my head. I didn't realize why. Stuff like when they made fun of Kanye West, I didn't realize why that was funny until I grew up. So
yeah, exactly.
That's the type of show it is.
Yeah, and same thing with South Park the movie. I think you watch it and it's just really funny, but underneath there is a very poignant message about taking things too far, especially things like censorship and wanting to protect children. And again, taking that way too far to the point that the message is lost and it's no longer about wanting to do things that are best for the children, and just because you want to be right and correct and morally grandstand everybody else.
It's very true.
And this is in a movie with a giant clitoris. Yeah, no, it's
the best middle finger I think I've ever seen, actually.
Best middle finger is a great way to describe this movie. Yeah, again, I'm nowhere near knowledgeable in South Park as I am early Simpsons, but I can definitely tell why this movie's great. And even though I haven't seen the show a lot, I still love it just that much because it is genuinely that good. It's kind of similar to the Bob's Burgers movie. I like that movie a lot. Not as much as this, but I'm not even a huge Bob's Burgers fan. I just think it's a good movie. But this definitely trumps that because it is genuinely just such a great musical and so hilarious every time I rewatch it. Like I said in my review, every time I rewatch this movie, it gets better and better.
Would it convince you to watch more of the show?
Yeah, I watched the first 2 episodes. I want to say a couple nights ago. I watched the first 2 episodes because they're on Max, and I thought they were really funny. I still prefer the movie, but I feel like if I keep up the show, I'm probably going to come across episodes that I'll probably like more. I don't know. And I'm not going to like dive into the show and, watch it continuously anytime soon. I'll watch it anytime I have a chance to, because I'm also watching other shows, and obviously I have a lot more episodes for the podcast planned in the coming weeks to months to years. So I do not expect me to be as consistent with watching South Park as I am other stuff. But
yeah, I understand.
From what I've seen, I definitely feel as though I do need to keep watching, because I mean, South Park is one of those things that's always been there. You know, even as a kid, when I was in middle school, I had friends who were obsessed with South Park. So even though I wasn't watching it as often, I knew of it. It's one of those things that even if I wasn't into it as a kid, I knew of it, like Pokemon or Harry Potter. You know, these things that I know of because they're so big, I can't escape them. But you know, I feel as though I should be watching more of South Park, especially from the movie. Like, if this is that sense of humor, it's right up my alley.
Yeah, I actually have a whole list of episodes I could probably recommend to you in speed run style, but I'll do that either at the very end in case we decide to talk about basketball.
Yeah. Do we want to take a little time to talk about basketball?
Sure.
Okay, great. I'll say this: I'm keeping the DVD of South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. There's not much to say about
Awesome.
it. It looks fine. I think it's one of those DVD transfers that looks good, and it's a widescreen DVD, so that's good. That's one of the main reasons I'm definitely keeping it. There's not a lot for bonus features, but I'm not gonna lose sleep at night knowing, because I can always just look up bonus features myself. I just want the movie, and the movie rules. I love it. So it's a definite keep for the collection.
Also, one more note about the South Park movie I forgot to mention is that, well, one of the shots in the movie of like the military marching to go to war has a shot of Jesus as one of the soldiers.
You know,
I
I
just thought
did
that was
notice that.
funny.
I did notice that this time around. I'm like, that's Jesus, which is so funny. So random, but so funny.
I'm surprised he didn't. I'm surprised he didn't come to help whenever Saddam Hussein and Satan came to the surface world, though.
He was busy. So, I don't want to spend too much time on basketball. I just want to mention that I honestly was expecting something far worse, and I fucking loved basketball. I thought it was a lot better than I was expecting. Not even just because I don't know. I've never really heard people talk about it in the same light as South Park, so I always just kind of assumed it was one of those duds from Trey and Matt, but I didn't think it was that bad. Obviously, it's not as good as a South Park movie, but I think
There's some good jokes in there.
there's a lot of really good jokes in it. Yeah, I thought it was really funny.
Yeah. It's interesting looking back at this movie too, because I remember when Roger Ebert gave this film a bad review, the the creators who starred in this film responded by naming an episode that aired a few weeks after this film came out. Roger Ebert should lay off the fatty foods.
Yeah. It's so funny. Yeah, I don't see what makes this any different from the likes of South Park in terms of raunchiness. I think that's something William was talking about. It's like, yeah, it's raunchy and out there, and there's a lot of weird jokes, but it's no different than South Park. It's probably not as poignant as South Park, I'll say that, but I still laughed. You know, like, it was funny. The jokes in this movie were genuinely funny and got a laugh out of me.
Yeah, I think the thing is though, I think what made this movie fail to resonate with the general audience at the time, I think compared to the likes of South Park and even director David Zucker's like previous films like Airplane and The Naked Gun, is that I think it's just a weirder premise for people to connect with, though. Like when you look at something like Airplane and The Naked Gun, those are more everyday normal premises.
Yes.
With that are taken in very zany, weird directions. Whereas basketball is a very weird concept that's taken in a weird direction. So in a way, it's kind of weirdness on top of weirdness.
Yeah, it can be a little much. So I understand the cult following it has, because you look at some of the Letterboxd reviews, and it does have fans. It does have people. It also does seem like one of those movies that probably wasn't a hit at first, but then later on in VHS and DVD markets, it got popular. So then it became like this cult thing for people, which I always really like seeing. So it makes sense. But also, I don't know, I just don't think it's that bad. I think it was genuinely funny at times.
It was. I don't think it comes close to as being as sophisticated as the best of South Park. But,
right. Yeah, I agree.
I know South Park has done sports parody episodes before,
Hmm.
like with one of my personal favorites of the whole show was The Losing Edge. But it also doesn't reach to being bad like one of my least favorite episodes of the show, Stanley's Cup.
Mm.
But that's a story for another day.
Sure, sure. Yeah, no, I recommend basketball. Maybe not to everybody. I know a lot of our friends would probably hate it, and which is why I'm kind of
Hmm.
glad when we watched it was just you, me, and William, because that was great. That was a great movie night. That was awesome. I had so
I
much
wasn't even
fun.
planning to talk about it. I wasn't
Yeah.
even planning to talk about it on the podcast. I was just trying to. I wanted to talk. I wanted to have. I wanted to have every Trey and Matt related film like on my. I wanted to have every single one of them logged
Hmm.
before we talked about this movie because just to refresh myself on their career.
Yeah.
And this was a movie I was always told. Like my dad always told me this movie wasn't very good growing up.
Hmm.
And then I watched it and was like, this is pretty entertaining. So I called him up like after that to tell him, hey, you know what? This movie you told me wasn't very good growing up was actually pretty good.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, maybe I need to watch it again.
Yeah. No, I had a similar thing with my dad. He watched Kingsman: The Secret Service, I think on a plane, and he came home and he was like, "That movie fucking sucked." And I was like, "Really?" And then I watched it. I go, "No, this rules, Dad. What are you talking about?" But he never cared. It's like whatever. At that point, it's like whatever. You're just gonna have differing opinions when it comes to that sort of stuff.
I think the thing is that the movie's sense of humor. I think it appeals more
Mm,
to us though
sure,
than like a general
absolutely.
audience though. It like the
Yeah,
types of movies we watch on Wheel Night like Bud the Chud
yeah.
or like no or even what's something else I was thinking of but like Michigan Monster like that's a bit I mean I'd say that probably reaches a bigger grasp in terms of like appealing to wider people but
Hmm.
I'd say like it fits in our ballpark more than your average Joe.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's why I
Because
love it because it's just this dumb stupid comedy, but I love dumb stupid comedies. So I feel like I'm going to like it more than your average person. I agree.
I the part like the whole like premise is basically about like basketball like the whole game the way it works is that like the players are trying to distract the opposite team from scoring into the hoops
Mhm.
or so and so I remember one point like Matt Stone's character is trying to distract one of his opponents and he basically shows a shirt of his wife and he's like hey that's my wife and it shows the other side it's him having sex with his wife. That was great.
Yeah, and then one of the other times, like Matt Stone just like pulls out his nipples and starts spraying milk at some other guy. It's like, yeah,
That
it's
was
that
great.
that's kind of the absurd. Like, if you don't find that kind of stuff funny, you're gonna hate the movie. But I find it funny. I love the movie, so I definitely need to find like a Blu-ray release so we can do an actual proper episode on it because that would be awesome.
I would like to own this movie too. I'd probably like to own all their movies at
Hmm.
some point. Even I don't think any of their movies are bad.
Hmm.
I think the worst I've given them is like a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, I was not a
You
fan of
know,
Cannibal the musical, but I feel like I could see why that one has a cult following too. It makes complete and total sense.
there's one other movie that I don't think there's one other movie they made after Basketball and the South Park movie, Team America, that you
Mm.
haven't seen yet.
I
But
have always
I,
wanted to see
I
that.
yeah, I would love to show you it because I freaking love Team America. That movie's hilarious to me.
Yeah, a lot of people really love it. I feel like I should because it's the only other movie I can think about that is just entirely puppets that isn't the Dark Crystal. So I feel like I kind of have to watch it just for that, because it's just like my favorite movie where it's a movie that's just puppets, no human actors.
Yeah, I think if you liked the South Park movie, and I think especially if you liked basketball, I think you'd lean towards the side of liking it.
I think
I
so
don't.
too.
I think the overall like it's the consensus is that it's a good movie, but it's not as good as the South Park movie.
Hmm.
But I the funny thing is I have them both at the same rating.
Mm.
Team America is one of my favorite comedies of all
Yeah,
time.
I
I
I love late '90s, early 2000s comedies, so I think this would be up my alley too. Yeah, I so want to watch it at some point.
I think the thing is, I actually think Team America is a funnier movie, but I do
Mm,
think South Park is a stronger musical and movie overall. I'd say
sure, that makes sense.
there's some parts of Team America that have made me laugh so damn hard
Yeah,
that is it actually kind of reaches, probably exceeds some of the funniest moments in South Park for me. That's high praise right there.
That is incredible high praise. Yeah, I gotta check this out next time I can. You said you had a list of South Park episodes you want to recommend to me, though?
I do actually.
Okay, let's go over those.
I can go through. If you want me, let me know if you want me to kind of zip through these in case you don't want to. I can go into some detail on some of these, but the thing is though, there are just so many amazing episodes of the show that I think that this list isn't even covering like half of them, not even a quarter of them. So
let's do this. How about you go through the big ones? How about you go through like, I don't know, maybe the top 10 or 15, and then if you do have more, we can like, I don't know, put it in like a link it in like the description or something like that.
Okay. First one I have listed is Woodland Critter Christmas. South Park has had a lot of Christmas episodes over the years, but I think this one is easily the best of them. And I don't want to give away too much about it because
no spoilers.
I think a lot of the humor in it is derived from how shocking some of it is. But I do think it is kind of insane how they actually came up with the premise of this episode just mere days before it aired. Like it was like the Saturday before the Wednesday it aired is when they finally cracked the code on what this episode would be about.
Oh, that's weird.
And it ended up being one of the best episodes of the whole show and one of the funniest. But the only thing I'll say is the Christmas time is once a year song is hilarious. But beneath it, I have Trapped in the Closets from season 9. This is the episode where they made fun of Scientology, and it has a really funny subplot with Tom Cruise, where he traps himself inside of Stan's closet throughout majority of the episode because the creators couldn't. Because the thing is that there was this whole thing in the early 2000s where like there's this rumor that Tom Cruise was gay. And so they couldn't say he was gay in the episode, so they just put him inside of a closet for him to trap himself inside. And everyone was trying to get him out of the closet. So, Good Times with Weapons, I mentioned to you. That's from season 8. It is a really damn good episode. Visually creative, has a great song. Let's Finding Love. Obviously, it's a dumb song, but it's very funny though.
Right,
is the thing.
Of course.
But yeah. Good Times with Weapons, amazing one. AWESOM-O. This is an episode centered around Butters and Cartman. One thing I've noticed throughout making this list is that a lot of the best episodes of the show center around the dynamic between Cartman and Butters, because I do think they are one of the strongest duos in the entire show because they are basically polar opposites. So they kind of work together as like cat and mouse type, dynamic as a cat and mouse type dynamic.
Sure.
Because they're basically polar opposites. Like Cartman's one of the most evil characters in all fiction, and Butters is like easily this innocent, gullible kid. So
yeah.
But AWESOM-O is the one of the few episodes where like Cartman does kind of suffer, some kind of like consequences, or he kind of gets what's coming to him at the. I won't say what happens, but it's a really funny episode. It's basically about like Cartman tries to trick Butters into thinking he's some Japanese robot sent to him as a gift, and then like Butters basically, Butters has this whole like thing he can basically Butters has this whole like thing he can use as a weapon to embarrass Cartman later on if he finds out that Cartman is actually trying to prank him. So Cartman's trying to get out of this whole situation and not prevent Butters from finding out that Cartman is actually trying to prank him. So it's a really funny episode. It's one of the absolute best. But then Christian Rockhard, I put it beneath it at season 7. This is an episode where basically Cartman finds out Cartman wants to form a band because he makes a bet with the other 3 boys that he can get a platinum album before any of the other kids can. And so he believes that the easiest way to get one is to pander to Christians. So he decides to use Tolkien and Butters to form their own band to basically pander to Christians, because they think that they can make whatever crappy music they want and that Christians will buy it no matter what.
Which is kind of
really
true.
It's kind of true, yeah.
Yeah.
Really funny though.
Yeah. Okay, a couple
Butter's
more.
very own episode. Butter's very own episode is one about this is actually the first episode where Butters is a central character. He I won't say what happens in it because
Yeah.
it's pretty shocking, but I will say it was definitely a risk at the time because most episodes centered around characters that aren't the four boys don't usually turn out well, unless they're Randy, I guess, but that's besides the point.
Yeah.
Make Love, Not Warcraft. This is the Warcraft-centered episode.
Yeah, I've heard of this one, yeah.
That's a really good one. Cartoon Wars, the Cartoon Wars duology is really good. It's the one where they got some controversy over, referencing a certain prophet and also ripping on Family Guy.
I've heard that one too, yeah.
Losing Edge I mentioned. Major Boobage is a really funny episode. It's the one where like Kenny gets high off of like sniffing cat piss and he imagines himself in the world of heavy metal.
Oh, that's incredible.
Scott Tenorman Must Die. This is the highest rated episode in the entire show. And it seems like all I'll say about it, just to not to give it away, but like it has probably the most shocking ending out of any South Park episode ever. One of the biggest twists in the entire show, actually.
That sounds awesome. Yeah,
it sounds insane. But
yeah.
Marjorine, I also put up there. That's an episode where basically Butters like it's a season 9 episode where Butters basically fakes his own death in order to get some kind of device from the girls who are having a slumber party. What's that thing called again? Where like you have a thing where you can it's a paper folding thing where you basically tell someone's fortune.
I don't know
I forget what it's called. But you'll find out in the episode.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about though.
Yeah. 200 and 201. This is the 2-part special where basically it's basically a culmination of all of the celebrities and things they've made fun of over the course of the past 14 seasons at that time. And a lot of classic characters and every celebrity that the show ever made fun of are like trying to rebel against South Park. And so it ends up with being a really good 200th 200 and 201st episode special. I must by the way warn though that 200 and 201 and the Cartoon Wars duology are pretty hard to come by because they're technically both banned for depicting a certain someone.
Yeah.
So the only way you can find them besides resorting to piracy is if you have the season 10 and 14 Blu-rays.
Okay.
A few other episodes, I'll just speed run through some of these. Put It Down from season 21. Raisins from season 7. Le Petit Tourette. It's an episode where Cartman fakes having Tourette syndrome just so he can say whatever horrible shit he wants. He wants to go on Chris Hansen's show so he can say all this horrible stuff about the Jews.
Okay.
The Fishsticks episode with Kanye West is really good.
Of course.
Season 13.
Yeah.
And the one I want to mention last is, I guess the one I want to mention last is You're Getting Old. If you were to ask me what my favorite South Park episode of all time is, I probably couldn't, but if you put a gun up to my head and force me to, I'd probably have to go with this episode.
Really?
It's not the funniest yeah, You're Getting Old. It's not the funniest episode of the whole show, but I do think it's the most poignant and sophisticated episode. And it's basically kind of like it's basically about Stan after his 10th birthday. After he celebrates his 10th birthday, he realizes that all of his favorite things and his favorite people and everything kind of around him kind of feel like shit or like sound like shit or look like shit. And it's basically a whole metaphor for like the more you grow older, the more cynical you become.
Interesting. Yeah.
And it's also an interesting episode to look back on too, because a lot of people actually thought that the way the episode ended, people thought that the show was ending at the time. It almost did come across that maybe Trey and Matt were getting tired of making South Park at that point because, well, it was season 15. The show had been on for like 15 years by that point. And also there was some comments made by characters in the episode itself that kind of alluded to a possible creative burnout that they were feeling at that time.
Mm.
But regardless, good. You're Getting Old is probably, I think, is one of my favorite TV episodes of all time. It is insanely depressing, but is also insanely, resonant, especially with me, especially since I've hit some pretty big mental low points in recent weeks. But not to get into that right now.
Mm. Yeah, no, that sounds interesting. I definitely got to check that out then. All right then. Yeah, great. Great recommendations. And yeah, if you have any more, again, I can just like post them down, like link them down below. We'll go from there.
Okay. I can copy and paste them for you.
Yeah, sure. All right. Yeah, is there anything last minute before I have you shout out your stuff, Lazy?
Not really. I don't really have anything right now, but
South Park good.
South Park good. I think it's pretty much agreed on, especially within our group of friends, that you're the Simpsons guy and I'm the South Park guy.
I think that's fair to say. I know a couple other South Park guys, but I would definitely consider you a South Park guy. I mean, from all the information you gave me, yeah, that's a good badge to wear.
Yeah.
All right then. Then this is the part of the show where you get to shout out your stuff, dude. Where can people find you?
I have my own YouTube channel. I have my own Letterboxd account. I have my own Blue Sky account that I don't really use that much. But this time, make sure to link my Blue Sky account in the description and not my Twitter, because fuck Twitter and fuck Elon Musk.
I agree. Agreed. Great. All right then. Then thank you all for listening. Thanks for coming on to talk about the South Park movie, and we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye. Just